Welcome everyone to the live stream this evening where we're going to be talking today about all of my digital network projects and web development projects and everything else relating to networks and the internet. I have quite a few of them, and the one that I want to talk about the most tonight is AmzroSevca, since pretty much every web development or digital network project that I've worked on has ultimately led to this. So we're going ahead, let a couple more people arrive, and as they're starting to kind of come in, I'm going to give you guys a quick overview of what we'll be doing this evening and how we're going to be kind of, again, going through the game plan. So we're going to start with talking the oldest web development and online community development projects that I've worked on, and then we're going to move kind of forward in time up until we eventually get to AmzroSevca as it exists today. And this spans multiple social media platforms, kind of go through which, startups that I had backed and which ones I was there for and I tried. To give us a little bit of background, I have been very active on the internet since a young age. I grew up with computers. I grew up with Windows XP to be exact. Came right off from Windows ME. So that kind of gives you a little bit of idea of the kind of time period when I grew up in. Grew up during Web 2.0, sort of like that Web 1.5 to 2.0 transitions, kind of when the web started to have user-generated content. It was coming off of its kind of a static iteration, right? Or a static era where people were just only putting up, information on websites, and there wasn't really anything such as like comment sections and whatnot. Of course, IRC existed, and obviously other forms of communication, but in terms of like the current web as we know it, where people would, sign up to service and like write blogs, or, go and sign up to service in order to start generating their own web pages, that didn't really quite start happening until like late 90s, early 2000s, around when I was born pretty much. So that was the internet that I grew up with, and then I, saw, of course, Facebook and then Twitter and Reddit and things like that come along, and then how those started to grow. I was not obviously an active user on platforms such as Twitter or Reddit or Instagram when they first launched. I was much a lurker because obviously you don't want your child on social media, and so I was more than happy to just read and not participate, which I think many people would probably agree that's a good thing, instead of giving your child unfettered access to spaces with strangers online talking about topics that are probably way over their head. But I really, again, admired the internet, at least in its earlier iterations. I thought it was a really cool place, and I was kind of fascinated with it growing up. And so as I got older and into my more formative years, I was like, hey, you know what, I want to go on ahead and or I should say maybe not my formative years, more when I got closer to like my teenage years, I started engaging with the internet a little bit more full on. It no longer was I just, reading the forum boards here and there or browsing YouTube comment sections. Instead, I actually had, by that point, created my own accounts, and I was actually interacting with the internet in a full-blown fashion. And, and that happened through about the late 2000s to early 2010s. But anyways, so since we've kind of covered that ground basis, giving people a little bit of time to show up, so I got a couple people here, we're going ahead and start taking a look at how these, web projects developed, how I gained an interest in web development, and how I gained an interest in just running like online communities and building these like, online community spaces, or e-communities as some people call them. So the first thing that we're going to look at here, these are drawings from Miiverse. So for context of why I'm showing you this, Miiverse is actually what kind of got me interested in the internet again. I had, again, followed the internet as it had formed from about like the early 2000s up through the late 2000s slash early 2010s. But I never was really super, again, like involved with the internet, right? I mean, I didn't have my own like blog page or website or anything really as a kid. I think I attempted to build one, but I just didn't quite understand coding at that point, or web development in general, to be able to script my own page. And things like Blogger, well, they did exist, weren't too appealing to me, and so I never really pursued using Blogger that much. I may have used it on one or two occasions, at the library while other kids were playing Roblox, but it never really piqued my interest that much, and I was, again, probably more involved reading various forum boards for video game reviews or something at that age. I don't really remember too much. But Miiverse, though, when Miiverse had, debuted with the Wii U and the 3DS, it was sort of like Nintendo's own social network, and because I had a 3DS console, and there's also the Wii U on the market at the same time too, I was like, well, it comes with the console, and like this is one way that you can reach other players who have the same console that you do. And I was like, and it comes built in, so like, why not use it? So then Miiverse happened, which was really interesting in its earliest days. People would use it as like a secondary DeviantArt. They'd post like Flipnote type drawings. Here are some of my drawings actually that I pulled from the Miiverse archives. I'd just make drawings or, join people's comment sections to share opinions on video games that were probably not all that relevant. Sometimes people would try to use, Miiverse for like roleplay or whatever. I don't know. I mean, people use Miiverse for a lot of stuff, and it honestly went kind of unchecked. It was probably one of the reasons why Nintendo shut it down. But, yeah, so that was like, the kind of the Miiverse era, and that's kind of what got me back into the internet, though, as it was. And then my interest in kind of using the internet to connect with people started to slowly build back up, and around that time, Google Plus was still a thing. And, of course, things like Friendster and MySpace were, like, long gone. Well, Friendster was long gone. MySpace was still a thing, but, I mean, like, who used MySpace by, like, 2011, like no one used MySpace past like, I don't know, like 2000. I mean, I'm sure there was some people who still used it, don't get me wrong. I mean, people still use Orkut up until it shut down, but it wasn't really in wide circulation. So Miiverse then got me back into the internet, right? And then that led into me finding an app called Amino a couple of years down the road when Smash 4 had released, and I was just looking for people to play Smash Bros. With. Unfortunately, I think by that point I'd gotten a little bit tired of Miiverse's very limited, interfacing options, and I was like, okay, I need to go and find like a proper, channel of communication to find other people who like doing things I like doing, and one of the things was, of course, playing video games, and in more particular was Super Smash Brothers, whether that was Melee or Brawl or Smash 4, which I got for the 3DS, I'm going to say about a year after it had launched. So this community that you're seeing on the screen right here, this wasn't like the official Smash Bros. Amino that most people were on. This was a community that I made as an offshoot of it because I don't remember why I made this community. I think I just wanted to try my hand at creating a community myself, and I think it closed like after like I don't know, 1 month or 2 months. It did not last very long, that much I remember. But yeah, no, so there was an app that was called Smash Bros. Or Amino, or Smash Amino. I think it was just called Smash Amino. And a lot of people, would gather there to play Smash 4 together. And then there was also, I believe, Amino dedicated to Melee. And so Amino had these communities. They're called Aminos. So for, if anyone's wondering why I keep calling these things Aminos, that's what they called their communities. Or they're called Aminos, and you could join these different Aminos that were like basically subreddits. And they functioned sort of like a mix between, I want to say, Facebook and Reddit, in the way that posts were handled and conversations were handled. So a little bit of an influence from Instagram as well, I will admit. But at this stage of the app's life, very early on in Amino, I think this was maybe only a year or two after I'd launched, it still very much had its own identity, and it was very, very easy to use. People on it were, by and large, pretty cool, but I mean, granted, there was like, you had like a circle of adults, right? I mean, at this point in stage, very early on, I mean, it was dominated, I think, primarily by adults, which made it way better because you weren't dealing with a bunch of kids. There were some of us kids on it, me included. I think I was like 14, 15 by the time that Amino had kind of established itself. And so there was quite a few of us on there. We were young, but not too young to use the app or anything. But thank God the platform was, again, dominated mostly by adults. So those interactions were pretty cool. There's maybe some social happenings here or there. But it was nothing ever too crazy. And then, after that, I continued to build communities on this app, on Amino, because I was like, hey, this is really cool that you can put together your own communities, and it's more involved. It was like a more involved process than, say, Reddit, which, Reddit you could set, like, a banner and a community icon, and that was kind of about it as far as customization. I think you also could set, like, theme colors or, like, background images at some point. I can't really remember, because I haven't been on old Reddit in, like, years at this point. The last time I think I booted up old Reddit might have been, like, 2020 or like 2019 or something. I think I visited old Reddit just to like kind of see what it looked like. Just gotta remind me myself of like what it was back, in like 2008, 2009. But since then, I don't think I've ever actually looked at old Reddit. And I've also stopped using Reddit since then. But that's a whole other story. But anyways, yeah. So this is kind of where I started to get more into developing communities on Amino. What you're looking at right now is Amino like much further into its lifespan towards when it was starting to kind of drop off on the other half of the bell curve. I believe at this point it had been sold to Media Labs. The original developers, Narvi, I think had jumped ship, or they were about to jump ship, and the application just started really suffering in terms of user in terms of user interface, in terms of aesthetic, in terms of features, in terms of just about everything. They started becoming weighed down with a lot of mimic features, I like to call them, whereas like, you know, the developers will look at other platforms and say, oh, this platform did this, so we should do it too. Oh, this other platform did this, so we should do it too. And before you know it, you had just an absolute just like nightmare mix of features from various other platforms, and Amino at this point didn't really know what it wanted to be. If I am to be assuming correctly, I think Amino's still actually a platform you can download and use, but it just feels horrible to use, especially for me, because I've at this point developed a lot of horrible memories of this app. So met some cool people here I'm still friends with today, but I mean, in terms of like just watching the app die and then just the kinds of people you could find, it was just not a good time, man. I usually like to call, you know, Amino like a Reddit or a 4chan for kids. It was a little bit closer to 4chan than Reddit because moderation was like non-existent. you had these like community moderators, or similar to like Reddit mods pretty much. They weren't administrators of the app because they didn't develop anything. But I mean, you could run some pretty shady communities on Amino that definitely were either borderline, like, you know, illegal, or they were definitely in illegal territory. I honestly have no idea why the administration of the app had such a lack of involvement in it. Early on, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't really, I think, until later that it felt like the app had been properly abandoned. Early on, actually, I will say the developers were more, I think, involved in the quality control of the app and wanted to make sure that communities were representing the app well, that, you know, they were filled with content that was going to attract viewers from, you know, various backgrounds, or had, you know, administrations that was made up of adults instead of kids. Like, by the time that I think most people I knew had finally left the app, because I left, around like 2018, was when I had just given up on the app. So it was about 3 years after I'd been there, 3 or 4. And by the time that I had, you know, talked to other people from the app, found them on other platforms, they were coming to me like, you know, like 90% of the app is like moderated by like 13-year-olds. I'm like, I am not surprised. Like, I'm not surprised at all. And it just progressively got worse. So that was the story of Amino. And then, and then there was, this, what you're going to be looking at. This is Akuna. So, I want to say around the second or third year that I had been on Amino. I think it was the third year. So it was getting close to the 10-year of my time on Amino. There was a social media startup called OpenBook, right? And they were trying to build the sort of cross between, I think, kind of like Instagram and Reddit. Or it was not Instagram and Reddit, my bad, no. It was like a cross between Twitter and Reddit, but without all of the garbage that both platforms had to offer. And I was pretty interested in, you know, a format like that, and the interface was pretty clean. I really liked the design. And so here you can see some screenshots actually from me kind of being one of the pioneering figures on the platform. I didn't do any development or anything, you know, with the application. I wasn't like a part of like the development team on the back end of it, but I was one of the first few people who populated the platform with a lot of communities, a lot of posts and things like that. And found some cool other people. Unfortunately, I don't think any of us held contact for very long because the app was unfortunately shut down and turned into something else, I think about 3 years into its development cycle, 3 to 4 years, you know. And that's kind of the scary thing about startups, is that you don't know if they're actually going to survive. And a lot of, you know, startups that do survive, they end up running into issues when they run out of their venture capital, or, you know, they finally go public and then they're traded on the market, and then goals start to shift and change. It's kind of what happened in Discord, right? Around this time, I was also using Discord. So like once I had stopped using Amino, I fully switched to Discord. I found Discord, I think, a year after I'd found Amino. So pretty early on in Discord's life. I've had to date probably like 5-6 Discord accounts. That I've just, you know, because I've joined and left the platform multiple times because of my frustrations with how, you know, platforms are developed and ran. So anyway, so that right there is OpenBook, and I'll touch a little bit more on it here, but we're going ahead and switch to the next part. So here's Dardo. This was called Dardo Social or Dardo app, I believe. And this was a social media network, another startup that I had backed, and I joined, and it fell apart quite quickly, unfortunately. I believe this one was only around for about a year, so far shorter lifespan than Okuna. In fact, I think Okuna eclipsed it by about 2 years, because I think Okuna didn't shut down until about 2022 or 2021. It ended up closing at some point when I was in university, and I still had their app installed on my phone, one of like the beta app, that is, where you had to get an invite to. And I went to open it, and it's like, oh, these servers just like don't exist anymore. And I'm like, oh no, like the app shut down, and their Indiegogo's gone too. But this was Dardo's. This is like this, I think it's called Product Hunt. Is a website that kind of keeps track of a lot of startups. And so this was, obviously the page for it that's still live. If you want to go read some information about it. Don't know what happened to the creator. They probably moved on with their lives to better projects and realizing that basically no one was using this. I will say I wasn't the biggest fan of Dardo's layouts, aesthetics, and style. It felt a little bit, I don't want to say corporate, but it felt a little bit, I don't know, bland and sterile. And I mean, from me personally as a designer, right? When I look at this, I kind of think like it looks okay, but it looks a little too generic and blank. You know what I mean? It just felt like it was lacking some sort of life. And so, by that point, I had, I created a profile on it and tried starting some boards and stuff, but I was not really feeling a whole lot. So I kept it as a backup option. I just was curious to see where it would go, and it didn't really go anywhere. So that was the story of Dardo. And that was, one of the, I want to say 3 initial platforms that I had either backed or I joined early. Another one was Minds.com or Minds app, I think, which was supposed to be, I think, an alternative to Reddit. That, it went downhill really fast. Most conversations on there were heavily skewed, and there wasn't really a reason to stay on there because I think you could only write posts. I didn't think you could even chat on the app. I think you could only write posts. So I left Minds probably about 2 or 3 years after I didn't get it, or after I had gotten it, and then I think I returned to Amino for like the last couple of months before I ended up leaving Amino too. So then there's Find Friends. This was another startup. I don't know if this is still around anymore. I tried looking up the web address, and I don't know if it still loads. Actually, I am going to check something here in the background while we're actually looking at the screen. Maybe I typed the web address wrong, but I'm almost certain it came back with an error that the servers had gone offline. So, yep, just typed in the web address just to double check. Yeah, it came back as a 44 void. So, it's no longer around. I think it was supposed to be an alternative to Facebook or something. I was like, hey, cool, you know what? They're pushing for decentralization. I'll give it a shot. And then signed up, and it was impossible to find people. There was like no documentation, and I'm not even sure if the maker really had planned for it to go anywhere. So I was like, hey, that's really cool and all, but like I had my profile set up, but there was like no way to find other people. There was no like search engines or search indices. There was no catalog, like there was just no way to find other people, which sucks because, again, decentralization I think is such an important thing, especially in our modern world, but, it wasn't meant to be. So that was Find Friends, and then there was OpenBook, obviously, like I just talked about, which got turned into Okuna, because, funny story, Facebook actually, I think, sued OpenBook for the name, which is crazy, but I think it's because I had book in its name, and Facebook is, like, really, combative about its identity, so they had to change the name to Okuna, which I think is a cooler name anyways, in my opinion. But anyways, so we're going to move on to what's next here. So here is Element, right? Element is a client for the Matrix protocol. Matrix has been around, I think, longer than Discord. And I believe I tried Matrix for the first time. It was 2016, actually. It was a little bit before I found the Amino app. And I had tried it in favor of Discord because I was just looking for various options like Aether, Lemmy, and things like that. I think Lemmy came way later. But it was like, there was like several TeamSpeak and Reddit alternatives I was trying out. I was kind of going through like Product Hunt and other startup sites and stuff, and open source, project pages, just trying to see what was out there. And I came across Matrix, and Matrix was pretty limited when I first found it, right? It had only been around, I think, for about 2 or 3 years by that point. This was, again, you're talking about like early to mid 2010s is when I was finding most of this stuff. And it did not look like anything that you're seeing right now. This is Matrix when I had returned to it at the like late 2010s, early 2020s, and I was creating modifications for the client. And I can tell that this is an older version of the application because all of the community icons on the sidebar are blurry. So that's something they fixed, I think, in a later update. They fixed the DPI scaling or whatever. But, yeah, this was Element, and so it was a client for Matrix, which was a chat protocol similar to, say, IRC or any, I guess, other kind of messaging form, I guess XMPP and stuff. But Matrix handled communications differently. It wasn't like exactly like those architecture. It did things completely differently on the back end, and how, you know, spaces were federated and how communities interconnected and how people's messages were stored and how security was handled. Matrix was, again, it's its own protocol. You can completely read up on it on like Wikipedia, or even better yet, their own actual website where there's now documentation that you can read up through the protocol and what it does and how it differs from other services, you know, such as, say, Signal or, you know, Telegram, things like that. And so, yeah, so I had gotten the client, I signed up to matrix.org, which was the public home server that pretty much everyone who first uses Matrix ends up on. And then I got the Element client and met a couple of, you know, cool people. And then I started going through and developing, you know, these communities, along with the themes. So by this point, I had plenty of experience building community through, you know, Discord, through Amino, through forum boards, because I think around it's like 2014 that I finally gave forum software a shot. I honestly was trying to tinker with it beforehand when I was much younger. I'm thinking like probably 2010 or 2009 when I first attempted to use some forum software. I had no idea what I was doing. It was around the same time that I was trying to like get my own how should I say it? My own wiki running with MediaWiki, and I also had no idea what I was doing. But you know, it was a fun learning experience. You know, I was pretty young at that point, anyways. Yeah, and so with, you know, with Element, sorry, I digress. But with Element though, by this rate, I had plenty of experience building communities. You know, I'd been through Minds, and I'd been through Amino, Discord, Instagram, Pinterest. You know, I've been on most platforms of the internet, so I kind of had an idea of, by this point, of how to build a community from scratch and, you know, run it. Obviously, didn't have all the necessary knowledge, and I still kind of don't. Running a community is very complex. There's a lot of parts to, you know, address and to be concerned about, and then obviously then you have to populate the community with users and an administration that has all the spaces covered, and obviously that takes a lot of time and resources, and in some cases even money. But yeah, so I was going ahead developing communities, and I was building these custom themes for the client that I was modifying with, you know, HTML, CSS, markup, XML, things like that. Or I should say XHTML, I guess. But anyways, so, you know, I was changing colors, changing backgrounds, building the themes out and things like that. And so I think this theme right here, I think it was just a theme to match my profile picture, which you can see kind of blown up in the background, sort of blurry, because that's what the Element client would use as a default background if you unblurred it. And then there's a kind of like galaxy astral theme that I built. So it's kind of like a dark galaxy theme. And then there's some couple screenshots with it being shown there. Oops, my bad. And along the sidebar, you can see all these communities. Those were a bunch of communities I had opened and managed. Matrix was a little bit interesting back then because there was no real equivalent to like Discord servers. There were the things that I think were called, I want to say they're called Spaces, but I think Spaces is what they're called now. They're called something else back then, and they were kind of a nightmare to manage. But they were just community pages where you could like add rooms to, and you see rooms as like the word on the left-hand side bar down there near the bottom, and you could like add rooms to these like catalogs. So functional sort of like a Discord server, but not quite exactly. Either it was that or it was something like the you know, icons that you see on the very far left were also rooms, and like you could attach rooms inside of rooms. It was really strange. And so pretty much every content space on the platform was kind of like a group chat. And I don't know if there's really any delineations between you know, community pages and rooms for a while. And I think that's something they fixed with Spaces, to where you could really kind of make like a true Discord server equivalent. But anyways, yeah, so that was kind of, the galactic theme that I had built. And then here is me running the client with the, communities, the thin community sidebar collapsed, and it's just showing rooms. And so a lot of rooms on Matrix, they had to be organized, if you wanted them organized this way, by, I believe it was like A to Z. I think it was alphabetical order, and then you could use like, what are they called? ASCII symbols, or like you use like, like these special characters, right? To sort rooms together in a certain order. And so, of course, you can see there where like AKD and RZA, which were two of the main communities that I ran, where me and a lot of my close friends hung out. Those had the highest priority symbol, and then it would go down from there. And then there's NKS, which for any of those who have, watched some of the other projects, or seen some of the other projects, or watched some of the other videos from the Energizer exhibition, I cannot speak right now, sorry, you'll know that is my game development team, the team that I built and ran. And this was like a second iteration where we tried to kind of get back together and revive some of the older projects. Of course, that didn't go quite so well, because a lot of us were just, dealing with COVID-19, the whole pandemic, and then going through things in our personal lives. And we thought, like, hey, this would be a perfect time for all of us to come back together, because we're all stuck inside. But then people just had other stuff going on, and so that didn't quite go anywhere. But anyways, moving on. Here is just another demo that I did. I believe I was trying to modify the app, or I was just kind of playing around with the app to see what all the features that it held. I will say Matrix was pretty versatile, and the Element client itself was actually pretty versatile. I mean, it had a lot to offer, right? I mean, you could embed music, embed video files, I believe, at some point. This was me kind of trying out this idea of like building, a room that could be used to store albums or store music from albums, and then people could then, take that and then play it in a media player. I believe you could even watch YouTube straight through the client. So there's actually some pretty cool things that you could do with Element, that again, that wasn't really quite, featured in Discord. Discord had caught up in some ways later on, but Element actually had an edge over Discord in quite a few features, especially with like customization of Markdown, characters that were supported, widgets that you could add. Like you could even open, I believe, like an Etherpad, I think it was called, which was sort of like a Notepad clone, but for the web, and you could like draw and sketch on it with like other people. And this was way before Discord introduced their like little apps and games thing. So, but moving on, here's another theme that I built for the app. This was kind of like a immersive like laugh theme of, I believe this might be the background from Mega Man like X6 or X5. I mean, it's been quite a while since I've played either of this game, so, if there's any Mega Man fans watching this, don't, scream at me. I honestly don't really remember which game the stage is from, but I want to say it's like X5, I believe. But anyways, we're gonna move on. This was another theme that I built. This is just showing off the Nintendo community that I put together. I believe at this point, Spaces had been introduced. Yeah, there you go, public space. You can see there at the top with the status there where it says, 4 members in a public space. So by this point, the platform had finally introduced Spaces. A lot of people were waiting on this for a couple years, myself included. And so I opened like the first Nintendo community, a couple other communities too. So I think I did Nintendo, Sega, Capcom was planned, and I also opened some communities, I think, for just general hanging out, and then philosophy and a couple other matters. But yeah, that's that there, and then this is what my room list had looked like by the point that, Element had finally completed a part of its roadmap. A lot of people were really waiting for the Element client to get its, more modern features, and so there was a lot of kind of doubt about where things would go, which ultimately led to me and a lot of my friends sort of parting ways because people got fed up with the platform, thinking that it wasn't going to get updates in time. But thankfully, it did get more updates, but it was kind of long after we were all gone. And by long after, I mean, honestly, just a couple months. So had we held out a little bit longer, we would have gotten what we wanted. But, such is the case with developing, a platform. The development of a, digital platform or a digital network is hard. There's a lot that goes into developing a protocol and then trying to support various clients, and then trying to keep the idea of decentralization robust, and obviously trying to work with issues such as end-to-end encryption on things, and then trying to make sure it just all works together. Decentralization does come with its own challenges that centralization just doesn't have to worry about. Whereas centralization has to worry about infinitely scaling, decentralization you kind of have to worry about like, hey, is this one thing from here gonna work with this other thing over here? And there's plenty of different problems you can run into. So then there was, this was a demo that of another project that I had built for the platform, where I was actually working to broadcast emulators or other local apps through the Element client, so that people could do things like run netplay games for, say, various video games, or if they wanted to watch movies together from like Plex server or whatever they wanted to do, right? And so here I am playing, I think it's like Super Smash Bros. Legacy XP or something, I believe. Hopefully I'm not getting the mod wrong. There's so many Smash Bros. Mods that I've forgotten about most of them. But this was just me kind of playing around with the platform further, pushing to its limits. That's one of the things I really liked about Matrix and the Element client in particular, was that there was a lot that you could customize, and there was a lot of things that you kind of develop for, because again, it's open source, so there was just, the sky was the limit for what you could add and change. You could change colors on just about everything, add sound effects, change the font that was used for the service, or change the font under different, categories or areas. And yeah, so it was really a cool platform, and then we step here now into, this is just kind of general web development, right? So just showed you guys Element and the Matrix client, or not the Matrix client, the Element client and the Matrix protocol. But here's some general web development that went on to inform Azure, right? So I kind of showed you guys the community building side, and now I'm going to show you guys some of the web development side. So there was a couple of websites that I, attempted over, I want to say about the course of 15 to 16 or so years. Probably is nearing about 17 at this rate, because, of how old I'm getting. I don't like to think about age, but it is what it is, And so I've been trying to build websites since about, I want to say 2008, 2009. Got the first inclination of doing it, I think, around 07, 08, because I thought like, oh, I can have my own, page on the internet, something to call my own up there online, with all the other cool people. And so then by about 2009, I thought like, yeah, I want to try building my own website. And so then I attempted on and off, over the years, until eventually I started prototyping some, website designs. And this was very early graphic design for me. So, I've been kind of dabbling with graphic design in a more casual manner since about like 2000, I want to say about 2008, 2009. And then this was probably about 2012, 2013 that I was like, wouldn't it be cool if I could like open my own version of IGN? and so then I made this. I don't know if it ever became functional. I don't know if this was just solely a graphic prototype. I think it was just a graphic prototype, but don't quote me on that. If I had gotten anything working, it barely functioned, but I'm almost certain this never was turned into a live HTML page. Then there was other websites that I designed, either for doing graphic design commissions on my own, or, doing web development for products that are more recent. This is obviously Sonic XS, which is, some of you, again, who are keeping up with the Energizer exhibition or have viewed it, you'll know that this is one of the other products that I've developed. This is an older version of it. You can see at the bottom, there's like a counter, like a visitor counter, and then links out to a couple other stuff that is now absent actually from the current version of the page. And then just a zoom in of that, and then this was an older version of ZS4. So anyone who's been familiar again with other products I've worked on, ZS4 was just kind of an umbrella for, I don't want to call it necessarily fan fiction, but it kind of was fan fiction. It was like fan fiction rewrites of various franchises that try to stay very close to source material. So I don't really want to say, I don't really want to call it fan fiction because it really didn't deviate that much. It's more so like, what if X company knew what games are going to make in the future and made a more coherent storyline? That's basically just what it was. So it was kind of like universe revisions, or fictional universe revisions. And then there's AmzroSevca again. I believe this is what it currently looks like. It's going to be updated though because this looks absolutely hideous. And then this was Zeus4 as it looked, I believe. This was 2020, yeah. So this was, I think it's like second or third visual revision. Obviously, you can see the background texture is completely messed up because this was also much earlier in my graphic design career where I still was trying to figure out how to build out asset libraries, and sometimes I would mess up patterns in the mix. Everything else looks pretty good though. So this was, again, by 2020, I'd been doing graphic design for about 7 years at that point. But it was still very casual compared to what I do now. But compared to the earliest of my works of me attempting graphic design, again, I was self-taught. This looks way better than anything else I had before. At least it's like, visibly like legible. It looks like there's some actual grid work done. So I'll give 2020 me a pass. I think this looks acceptable. And then there is this website that I had developed, Energizer. It was just going to be kind of like a news reel website or news feed website. So wasn't anything really too interesting. Actually, I didn't even know if there was any working buttons on the website. I think it's just a title banner and then just links to just news. So why I made this, I don't remember. But this, of course, you can see is a news story about the Olympics being impacted by COVID-19. But anyways, and then here's Discord to Element. So this is a project that I ran for a while that was pretty much about transitioning from Discord to Element, right? To help people kind of learn the Element client for Matrix and give them some, alternatives to Discord. And you can see there's a couple donators. There weren't really a whole lot of people involved with the project. I started it and then I got maybe about 5-6 people involved, and we were trying to, again, sort of give people on Discord a way out in case Discord finally got to where it is today. I knew the handwriting was on the wall since as far back as about 2020, and I was really concerned about what direction Discord was headed in. I was really cool with the platform about 2016 to 2019, and it was my immediate go-to after I left Amino. But then Discord started to hit a lot of the same problems as Amino because, it's a natural life cycle of a centralized platform. It happened to Facebook, it happened to Reddit, it happened to Twitter. I don't know if I can say it happened to Orchid because I think Orchid shut down too early to really tell. But it's also happened, Pinterest, happened to Instagram, Snapchat. I mean, you go down the list of these platforms, Twitch, so... but anyways, so that was a project that I ran for a while, and it just kind of would explain features between Discord and Element, and it's like, hey, this is the feature you're used to using, over in Discord. What equivalent can you find on Element? And then I would give a guide on how to do things. So that's what I ran there, and then this is actually a single-page website that was pretty much me announcing the closure of a lot of old projects and web fronts that I had ran. So some of you might be familiar with the Golden Puffin 520 brand name because I ended up talking about it, I think, over on Arc Mavotics, which is the sister exhibition that's holding all the old works. So Arc Mavotics more or less replaced this, what you're looking at right now, and what replaced this before Arc Mavotics was obviously my main channel, just AmzroSevca. And so I moved a lot of the, work from these other channels and these other projects, you can even see in there the paragraphs like Spin Deck Hedgehog, Puffin CD64, Marble Clown Shine Escape. These are all things that I was doing throughout, again, over the past 15 to 16-ish years, and then I consolidated them all into this sort of museum of works that I called the Golden Puffin 520, sort of based on my original username or internet username. I shouldn't say it's original. It's just one of my more prevalent or prominent ones, which was HyboPuffin64. It's like one of the first internet usernames I actually stuck with for quite a while before I ended up settling with AmzroSevca, and hopefully that'll be my forever internet username. But screen just went blank. What just happened? Anyways, so that was that, and we're going to go on ahead and hop into the next section. So we're actually starting to now get much closer to talking about Azure itself. So before Azure, right before Azure, there was a product that I made called AmzroSevca. And I know for some of you who are watching right now, you're probably like, why does this guy have so many names that start with A? I got like AmzroSevca, I got Azure, I got AmzroSevca. one of the guilds that I ran in Azure was called Asnetavin, which was another Discord server I ran. I don't know. I have some kind of obsession with the letter A. I really like the letter A. Even when I was a kid, I tried to name myself, I think, Andrew or something. So, take that as you will. But yeah, so this was AmzroSevca, and it was supposed to be an interactive, community-driven RPG. And so you might be like, well, what's that? This sounds really complex. It was basically supposed to be a blend between forum boards and text-based RPGs. So it's like, think of like a MUD RPG from back in the day, combined with like IRC chat, and then like, I don't know, really early forum software. I'm trying to think of like, what would probably be a good example? Maybe like Space Battles. I don't know if anyone remembers the forum board spacebattles.net or .com. I can't remember what the ending was. But yeah, I mean, it more or less was like, what if you could take like forums like GBA Tempo or whatever, combine them with like RPG elements and have where people could like sort of, I don't know, gain. It was supposed to be like kind of like an MMO text-based RPG where people like could gain levels and points and experience and just sharing their passions and kind of coming together and like, I don't know, exploring their interests and things like that. So this could cover everything from, again, like drawing and painting or cooking or dance or playing video games, like literally anything. It was this really open-ended idea. And of course, it didn't really last that long. It was a pretty ambitious idea, I must admit myself. Most people who I kind of introduced the idea to were like, what is this? Like, this is crazy. But it was inspired a lot by my time of observing, platforms and games back in the day, like Club Penguin or Habbo Hotel, or, I don't want to say IMView. I never really got involved with IMView. That game had serious issues. But, but basically just like social MMOs, as I'd call them, right? Or even like, I guess, sites like Gaia Online, from back in the day, for those of you who, actually, use Gaia Online. I never stuck around very long Gaia Online, thought it was kind of boring actually, but it was part of the inspiration for why I created AmzroSevca way down the road, because Gaia Online, made up a part of my childhood, so, let me see here, hang on, just give me 1 second. Sorry about that. Yeah, I just had to quickly take a quick message. But anyways, so this is AmzroSevca. Right now you're just looking at, this is just one of the archive channels from it. I saved a lot of my work from the past because I, knew at some point in the future I was going to have to reference it or I was going to showcase it. So we look at another image. This is kind of a clear idea of how the thing worked, right? So you would have these sort of like a adventure channels. Like there's like an adventure map and you would have these like sub areas that were, Discord channels, and you could go into these channels and you could actually navigate kind of around the community sort of in the fashion of like a video game or like a text-based RPG, right? And then of course there was, forum like rooms where you could just discuss stuff normally, right? And where you could have conversations about how your day went or talk about music or movies or whatever. But you could open up like these different locations by going through like these quests. So it functioned kind of like a text-based version of like Club Penguin, if that kind of makes sense. Just without obviously the DJ floor dancing in Club Penguin, but yeah, that's kind of the general idea of it. So you could like select different reactions that would take you to different places in the community. This was, I believe, about 7 years, or hang on, I gotta do some math really quick. This was about 7 years into my time with Discord. So by this point, I'd become very intimate with developing Discord communities, and how everything functioned with it, of, hooking up bots and, user reactions, or even developing bots. I think I had 2 or 3 of my own on hand that I just did some basic stuff, and then also using, like, IFTT or IFFTT, I can't remember which one it is, to, like, add in, content feeds, or to have, like, live, or how should I say it? I used to have dynamic items in your Discord server. So, yeah, but anyways, and then here's some more screenshots from, the project. And I believe if you look at the sidebar, I think this was around when I was transitioning between one older version of the project to a newer version. Because the one on the bottom looks like it has this older icon there on the left-hand side, the very far left-hand side. Because it was originally, I think it was called Cyberstar, was the original name of the project, and then it was called AmzroSevca, and then it was like AmzroSevca Cyberstar, and then it just turned to AmzroSevca itself. But anyways, yeah, so you could select like different roles and stuff that would technically like affect how you navigated the you know, community, or how you navigated the game, I should say. Of course, you could still get access to all areas, but you would have to like do quests a specific way, or like team up with other people in order to like unlock new areas, and then you have access to more chat spaces. It was a very, very ambitious thing. And then this was me creating like a sort of continuous, these like continuous, how would I say it, page designs custom to Discord. And so instead of just, you know, having like text run out in Discord's, you know, message format, instead it would be like these custom design pages that would have like gradients that would bleed into each other, or patterns or themes that would bleed into each other, and create these continuous scrolls. But yeah, I mean, largely this was just like, if you combined like Radical Dreamers for the Super Nintendo. If any of you guys are Chrono Trigger fans or know what I'm talking about, it's like a text-based RPG for the Super Nintendo. So it's like if you combine like Radical Dreamers with like V-Bulletin, you know, forums from way back, pretty much. Or, you know, or Pro Boards, or whatever other, you know, forum software options that people would use. I think there's like even stuff like what was it called? It was like PHPBB or something. I can't really remember. It's just been so long. I mean, you know, at this point we're easily like 16 years away from when forums were really prominent on the internet, even, you know, before Reddit basically killed them all. But anyways, yeah, and then here's another area. This is like Secret of Mana. So I was also trying to incorporate like areas from like Piece of Fiction. So it might be like video games, movies, books, things like that. And, you know, so it was definitely heavily fandom driven at the start, but I did want it to be kind of a thing that would just open up to about fandoms of just every kind, not just strictly just like fictional stuff. And then that was that. And then there was like demos that I had created just to see what it'd be like to use reactions to get around between rooms. And so this was like a small function demo that I had, you know, made. Concept demo to be like, hey, this is like how you would go between, you know, places, and like it would change the pathways with the roles and things like that. And so there you can see me doing that. And then there was the rest of the community as it was. This is an actual recording of what it looked like, so you guys, you know, don't have to just look at still images. You can see actually how it was coming together, and it was huge. It was really, really big. I don't know if there were any channel maximums on Discord back when I was developing this, but I believe there was probably some kind of limit they do eventually hit with channels. And so there was a lot of consolidation of rooms, and things would get renamed and moved and changed. But there was, I believe, regions for like Mega Man, fighting games, various other video game franchises, and then some stuff also for art, for design, for, you know, videography, and a couple other things. And we were slowly starting to expand out the number of hobbies that, you know, this game would have been home to. Or I should put game in air quotes. But yeah, and then there was also, I couldn't find it, but there was also some kind of like battle system that I was building, and there was a video demo for that, but I just couldn't find it in the time frame that I was assembling all of this together. So I was just like, you know what, well, I guess it's lost to time for the time being. But hopefully I come across it again, because it was a really cool thing to witness, for you to have people like in real time fighting, you know, a text-based system. But anyways, and then also the community also held, or I should say that within the game, there was also events that would be, you know, featured in each region. So like for the Legend of Zelda region, like we were running like a Link to the Past speedrunning contest, where, you know, you'd have these teams that would kind of play in like rotation, if that makes sense. I know there's a word for it. It's races. A relay race, that's what I was trying to come up with. Relay race. This was pretty much a relay race through A Link to the Past. So you'd have like 5 people per team, and they would take on different segments of the game. And the goal is just to see who could kind of, you know, put together the strongest team and know who was best at which part, and see how fast they could all do it. And I believe this was just one of the pitch demos for the event. And then we ran, I think, a short circuit for about 2 days after that, and it was pretty cool. We got a couple of people involved. I don't think we filled all 6 team slots, or if we did, there were some teams that definitely were at a disadvantage because they had less people than the other teams. So yeah. But anyways, so now we're gonna go on ahead and get into the next section of all of this, right? And this is now we're going to start talking about Azura, which is what all of this has kind of led up to. What you're looking at right now, this is just kind of a mass overview of everything we just kind of talked about. These were all the communities that I've ran over the years across, a dozen different platforms. And, this ranges from personal communities to like, I don't know, I guess you'd call them experiments that I tested out that some went places and others certainly didn't. But yeah, so you can see all those icons there that represent all those different ones. And then here we are now with the genesis of Azura. So how Azura actually came around is that I was wanting to replicate or restore really the original version of the Amino app, right? So when I first came across Amino way long ago back, again in the mid 2010s, early to mid 2010s, I was really I don't know. I was impressed by it. If I'm just being honest, I'll just say I was impressed with the app. There was no other platform really at the time that managed to have the identity or strike the right chords that Amino did. And especially as someone who was interested, again, at that time, largely in competitive gaming, it managed to give, these options all in one space that other platforms just were lacking in, right? Like Reddit was really good for like linking news articles, but it wasn't really good for say writing blog posts or having starting group chats to get together with other people to do things. It wasn't really cut out for say having a mixed media feed, right? Whereas Amino was able to do all the things, and it did it in a way that felt pretty natural, and it felt reminiscent of like early Web 2.0, right? It kind of felt like it was in between that gap period between Web 1.5 and Web 2.0, and it felt special. It really reminded me of the early internet. I think that's kind of why I was really drawn to it. And you could like make your own wikis where you could store information about things. You could write your own, again, blog post. You could, you could have a followers and following like Twitter. And it was kind of cool. It was honestly kind of a cool little platform. And so what you're seeing right here is the first signs of me trying to replicate the platform from scratch, right? And so this was a wireframe that I did in my quest to try to like replicate the old version of Amino. Now I want to say, Azura was not my first attempt at trying to replicate or modify Amino. I had actually started learning quite a bit about software development and web development back in the mid-2010s because of the fact that I really liked Amino and I wanted to preserve that experience. But unfortunately, the entire platform just went to garbage, and my attempts at modifying it were not super successful. There were some projects floating around in GitHub that were kind of also trying to attempt modifying the platform or making custom clients for it, but they never really got anywhere because the API was pretty locked down, or access to it just didn't really exist. So, but yeah, anyways, I think the only other thing that I could really add on here is that I think prior to Azure, or prior to me doing what you're looking at in front of you, I believe I may have tried to make like a sort of proxy site to Amino that would like use Amino servers for stuff, but it never really went very far, and I think the idea died off pretty early because I just got frustrated with it not really being really the thing that I wanted it to be. So anyway, so yeah, so this was kind of again like the seeds being planted for this much bigger project, and you'll see how it evolves. So that was the first iteration. Then I had made, I believe this is another mock-up, but instead of just being a wireframe, it's more developed, a little bit more figured out. It pulls in, I believe, some UI choices and design decisions from Amino directly itself, and so it was, you can tell by anyone who's used Amino before, this was heavily inspired by what Amino ended up looking like around, I want to say 2017. So a little ways into its lifespan. Still, the platform was good. Some of the warning signs did start showing up in 2017, I will admit. But I was still really hopeful that the platform would continue in a good direction. And then by 2018, all of those hopes and dreams were shattered, and I was like, all right, time to jump ship. This is an absolute nightmare. But anyways, so there's that. And then this was then the realization of those concepts, right? So no longer were we just looking at wireframes or mockups. Finally, I had actually established a website, like something you could actually access to the internet, had its own domain and stuff. And this was built, I want to say probably just 2 to 3 years after I shut down the bulk of my other websites. And by this point, I had skills in web development and skills in software development. I was much more confident in putting together live working pages and demos, in building out online systems or in online communities. And so this, I believe, was just a very small demo where I was the only user, of course, on this quote-unquote platform. And there was a very simple homepage. Didn't really have a whole lot on it, as you can tell. The homepage is a thing in the middle. It was all very vague. It was just kind of an idea in the back of my head, and anyone looking at this or came across this, way back then, kind of out in the wild, would have been like, "What is this? Like, does it even work?" You couldn't even navigate, I think, to my profile without having to specifically type in my profile address. So, yeah, that was that. This was like the very early days, and a lot of like these assets you're seeing, I think some of them might have actually been like modified images that would like occasionally be updated. I think either manually, or there was like a way that values would be read, and then I would have like certain images stored for every value set. It was really a nightmare on the back end. Everything I'm describing right now would probably make any developer absolutely cringe. It was bad. It was really bad. So, yeah, but anyways. So then this was then the homepage, a little bit more fleshed out later on. It started to finally have buttons so you can navigate to stuff. Still, it was not very well optimized. There was problems with it. It's hard to navigate. There weren't really clear indicators about what you're supposed to do or what you're looking at, where you're supposed to use. And I remember, I think around this time, I had shown this to an individual I had known at my university, and they were like, "Oh, this looks interesting," and then from there on, I had developed it further, because honestly, without their encouragement, I don't really know if I would have continued developing it, but they thought it was a good idea for me to continue developing it, and so I did, and it still remains as one of my probably biggest personal projects, and it's something that I'm very fond of. This guy kind of treat as my baby. So big shout outs to that individual. He will always be remembered. I mean, yeah, again, without them, this probably would have not continued. So then there was like, you could go and try to find different community categories similar to like Reddit, whatever, right? And then, there's a couple other pages for when it first looked like. This was a very, very early newsfeed page. Me finally starting to figure out, some stuff with CSS that I had, I think, kind of failed to figure out before, or I'd maybe gotten to this point on a consistent enough basis. But I was finally starting to learn like the box model and, customizing things further. Granted, the box model is something that's very simple to learn, so I'm not gonna act like this was the first time I ever started to utilize CSS properly. But it was one of the first times where you didn't really think twice about the work that went into it. I'd become more comfortable with it, if that makes more sense. And then this was after it had been renovated once more. So now, icons actually had, they were properly identified so people knew where they were going if they clicked on stuff. There wasn't really a lot of documentation still about the project, so it still was very hard for anyone brand new to the platform to navigate, right? It was very much still in its infancy. And then, here was a little bit of, writing about how it worked. And this is where wheel cores started to come into effect, right? But back then they were called web wheels. And so web wheels were kind of like the follow-up to web rings from the early web. I don't know if, any of you guys remember web rings from like GeoCities or early Yahoo and things like that. But web rings were basically websites that would all like interlink or link to each other or link back to each other. And I do remember, there's sites, I think, like starman.net and stuff. Yeah, I know, I'm an Earthbound fan. That would link to each other. You have like video game websites that would link to other websites of like, the same video game company, fan sites and stuff like that. Now, oftentimes you could find web rings with like fan sites, whether it was for, like car culture or video games or like skating, like, skating culture, like skateboarding and stuff. Oftentimes websites, that were of the same topic or thing, they would usually link to each other, because that was kind of one of the ways you could easily promote yourself on the internet, right? Is have the crawlers go through like websites that have links to other websites on their websites. So hopefully what I just said there makes sense. I don't know. Probably sounded a little confusing. And then here's a featured content page. This was completely revamped. Started taking more of its current form. Still a little bit, this is pretty dry. But I was trying to do what I could, and I believe this was around when I think the Mario movie had been first announced. So this is when we're getting closer to like the pandemic starting to kind of roll off. And then this was Azura on the Matrix end. So for those of you who don't know, Azura is a digital network project that spans, how do I say it? It's a digital network project that just exists on the internet, and people can use it to build their own web communities with whatever protocols or platforms that they want. So I don't really call Azura like its own platform, right? I don't call it, because it's not a centralized platform, and it's not really a platform in general. It's more like a toolkit. And so the way I describe it is that it's a digital network engine, or a digital network project, and people are able to utilize this like digital network engine to build their own websites, to build their own web spaces, and then they can choose what protocols they want to use for, conversing with each other, and then kind of integrate it there beyond. The default protocol for Azura, like the default chat and content protocol, was Matrix, because it's open source. It's very easy to get into relative to other open source endeavors. And it was something that I knew would be most familiar for those coming from platforms such as Discord or TeamSpeak or IRC or anywhere else, right? This would be very alien still to someone who might be coming over from, say, Instagram or Snapchat or, I'm trying to think, Pinterest, or something that's more what I like to call, like a content-driven centralized platform. Like, I mean, if you had someone coming off of Twitter or like Pinterest looking at this, they'd be like, what? Like, I don't get it. And that was a bridge that was going to eventually have to be, or a gap that was eventually going to have to be bridged. So, and you'll see how I did that later on. So there's some other screenshots from the network in its early days. Had a mirrored newsfeed and things like that, and then polls and all sorts of fun stuff. And then, a couple friends, early users kind of adopting the engine. And then this was the website then as it started to continue to grow, so then it had a proper nav bar, and its explanation page had been buffed by a little bit, and you can kind of see where the network starting to come together in that bottom image on the web page. It's like a diagram explaining how Azure originally worked. And so the way that it originally worked, actually I want to take a break and talk about this. The way that Azure originally worked was that people could open up their own their own versions of Azure, or their own like clones of it, and to like kind of build up on this idea of decentralization. So there was Azure.com, which is not its address anymore, but it used to be. And then there was like, the ability to make your own Azure. So you could have like bobs-azure.com or marysazure.com, as it uses for those names. And you can make your own version of Azure that would have its own ecosystem, right? And those ecosystems could then interact with each other. Like these different Azuras could interact with each other. Eventually this concept was scrapped because it still is possible with Azure as it exists now. The entire concept is still there. It's just not the main focal point anymore, and it's not really how it's supposed to be used, because people, early on into Azure's development, and by people I mean the people I'd invited to test it, there was concerns that, decentralization could be weaponized for, bad use cases. And so we also were kind of trying to explore avenues of security, some sense of unity and things like that, right? Because we did want to have a shared value across this decentralized network, which is, it's a little bit hard to do if you have people who are completely autonomous. So we kind of then started to, tilt more towards sort of like a federation of states type of thing, sort of, right? So a little bit more of like a democratic model that still had, heavy enough emphasis on autonomy. And this is also around the time I think that I had to start refreshing myself on a lot of socio-political concepts, because building a working system of governance on the internet, it's kind of hard, right? And so again, like I said before, way back when, there is a lot of work that goes into building an online community. It's never as simple as just saying, hey, I just want to open up a chat room, bam, I'm done. There's a lot of different concepts that you need to understand and study and really think about in order to try to solve some of the problems that we're currently facing on the internet. So that was that. And then There's the feature page there again, and then this was what the home feed looked like, I think by version 1.5 or early 2.0. And there is Gunvolt from a Zero Striker Gunvolt turned into ASCII art, and that was like the welcome banner for the community. And this layout was kept throughout the later iterations of Azura. So Azura continued to kind of look the same way in terms of layout from this point onward, as you will continue to see. And then the backgrounds got changed, got a little more colorful, less drab, because I was like, I'm getting tired of looking at black and white monochrome. You know, I want to be more colorful like Azura, you know, or not Azura, I mean, you know, the platform I was trying to replicate. And then there was, in the background, went through a couple changes. This background was horrible on the eyes. I have no idea why I went through was like such heavy gradients and then did such a hard burn in on a pattern. But this was like really hard on the eyes, and I kept that, I think, for a few months before I was like, this just hurts to look at. And here you can see this webpage is kind of telling people like how to make their own, how do I say it? Oh, no. This is telling people how to create their own wheel core, which I don't know if it was finally called wheel cores at this point or if it's still called web wheels, but this was basically like the very first iterations of, I guess, the documentation and guides for like Azure. Like, how do you actually start using Azure, right? Because it existed, but like there was no inroads in how to actually join the network or you know, or even understand what it was all about. And so I believe this was me working on trying to put together some documentation for it. This doesn't look quite complete. I think those other steps where they're listed, they're waiting for information to be added, because you can obviously see that step 1 has a lot more written there than the others. So anyways, this was an events page for Azura. Had, again, pretty basic, you know, wireframey looking visuals. And then this was a blog that got opened where, you know, this was what was being mirrored over to Matrix, which you saw before. And then there is the support board, which had a couple of frequently asked questions. I don't think this got really far in development before it got changed. And then there was the Wheels Index. And so this is how you could finally start finding user groups and finding people's kind of like host communities. So I'm going to kind of explain a little bit more of that later on, where the visuals are more developed and I can kind of explain the concept better. So if you're kind of confused right now, don't worry, we're going to get there soon. I just want to finish showing off the older stuff. Again, this is a carryover from the earlier version. It's just that there's now a proper background. There also was like some really weird, I don't know why I had some stuff outlined. I don't know if this was like me debugging the website or something, but yeah, there's like these thin line boxes around stuff. It might have just been because I was trying to figure out maybe like, you know, pixel area of images or something. And then here was Aznetovan, which I mentioned earlier. Aznetovan used to be a Discord server. And actually, I'm going to bring it back up here really quick so you guys can see what I'm talking about. If we go back to this image right here, Aznetovan is the one that is right beside, you can't see my mouse, but it's the one that's like one over from where it says AM by like the RZA icon. It's that like zero looking thing with like an S in the middle. That was Aznetovan. It followed off of Anocadrum, which was that's the one that's right left to it, right in between AM and it. Again, I named like all my communities with A. I don't know why. Even the one on the far end of that row, the third row all the way to the right, it was called A3SD Ocean. I don't know why A was just like everything, but I don't know. I mean, I think the letter A looks cool, so that's probably it. But anyways, yeah, so Aznetovan was a Discord community that I ran for several years. It was the follow-up to other communities that also had a bunch of different names, like Static Star, Seraphic Star, Stormseer. I think, I'm trying to see, most of our icons are down here on like the second to last row near the right. Those are the communities I'm talking about. And all of those came from A3SD. So the A that you see on the far right hand side, like 3 down, that is the friend group of where everything originated. And that friend group was on Discord and was made up of people I'd found on other platforms since like 2000, I think like 9 or 8. So it was like the OG crowd, as I like to call it. Now for those curious, Sword and Sphere was not anything related to like right-wing nationalism or anything. I just thought when I was younger that it just sounded like a cool name because I like thunderstorms and I also like spherical things. And so unfortunately the community did have the initials SS. But just to kind of, again, I want to put it out there, like it was not like some neo-Nazi group or something. In fact, we were very much a we were very much a politically left group. A lot of us had to have very leftist views. So but yeah, because I know some people might be in the comments thinking like, oh my goodness, would the initials of that be SS? Are you a Nazi or something crazy? You know, I mean, you just never know with the internet these days. So just putting that out there, that way people don't get the wrong idea, wrong impression. Better be safe than sorry. But anyway, so yeah, that was those communities, and they eventually became AmzroSevca, and then AmzroSevca was moved from Discord to Azura. Since I was like, hey, now I'm finally building my own digital network engine type thingamajig, like I want to move my own community to my own project. So I did. A couple of people joined me there, really cool friends. Shouts to them, they do amazing things. A couple of them I think even have YouTube and Twitch channels. And then this was just a 404 error page I was working on for it, and then this was a person, one of the earlier people who joined Azura earlier on, as it was being developed. They're still actually there. I just don't think they're active along with most of the people because honestly, the platform's kind of died because I haven't been keeping up with it lately. I've been working on so much other stuff, which you guys can obviously be a witness to, seeing Energizer and Rockman, right? I mean, it takes a lot of your time to try to put back together like 200 plus projects in the span of like 12 months. So, I've been absent from the community for a very long time. I'm not even sure people even talk there anymore. And then here was some of the early profile pages of Azura. So you can obviously see on the far left-hand side mine, which very much is inspired by the aesthetics of Amino. And then, you know, there's some other people that opened up their own profile pages. And the really cool thing about this was that, you know, all of these profiles and stuff, these were all individually hosted on their own domains, right? And so you could like connect and disconnect your profile from your own main domain or from your own subdomain. So it was crazy. It was crazy. And actually, I want to talk about actually how some of that stuff worked because I did mention I was going to talk about it here. Yeah, and then there's my profile. But you know what? Actually, we're going to take a look at the live website. So let's go on ahead and do that, and I can talk a little bit more about how like the interface worked and the you know, the back end of it, I guess, worked. You know, the actual architecture of like the links and domains and things like that. So let's go on ahead and then hop on over to the website. So here we are over now on the actual live site. We're at Azro.social, which is of course what we're looking at here. I don't know if Azro.com still works as an address or a sub address. It does not anymore. I don't know if it's still in my hands. It really should still be in my ownership because obviously I don't want someone else to take a previous address of the site and then use it for malicious purposes, but that's another story. I'll have to worry about that later. Anyway, so yeah, this is Azro.social. Takes you straight to the waiting list page. That's kind of like a splash page. You can go on ahead and like type in like your name and email, and it will go on ahead. And theoretically, it would send you a sort of a confirmation to your email that you're subscribed to an email newsletter. I don't think the system's working any longer, but that was kind of what I had implemented there for new members or new users or those who were interested in the site. And so it kind of gives you a little bit of rundown like, hey, you want to be a part of Azro's future, and then gives you a sort of cursory glance at what it is. Granted, I will say, if you want to actually know about the platform, you're not going to find information about it here. So this was kind of a bad splash page in retrospect, but I mean, it is what it is. And here you can see various of the user profile pages that we will all be seeing here in a second, and then obviously what Azro looks like in its current iteration. And the whole idea really behind Azro was to build a decentralized network that was committed to longer form discussion. It was trying to restore the human element to the internet, slow things down to a more you know, human pace. You know, I think one of the biggest problems with the internet as it is now, it moves too quick, there's too much information on it, there is an undercurrent of anti-intellectualism, there is certainly a lot of very antisocial behaviors that are celebrated or just kind of left unchecked. And I'm not saying the internet was, you know, any kind of, you know, perfect special place way back when, you know, during forum boards or whatever. I mean, people were still rude people were still rude, but there was certainly, I think, a level of, you know, netiquette that was sort of expected out of people that nowadays is by and large pretty much gone, which I think is why it's so easy to be a troll on the internet nowadays, because it's really hard to tell if someone's trolling or if they're being dead serious. Like, it's hard to tell if someone's just being a genuine, like, horrible person, or if they're just trying to pull your leg. So anyways, we're going to go ahead and head over to the About tab here. I can give you a quick, cursory glance at what AmzroSevca actually does. And so I built AmzroSevca more or less to try to fix the ills of the modern internet, and then to also combat the issues of, short form content, the lack of more, again, human-paced conversations where, more thought is involved. You're not expected to be there 24/7 to respond to everything, right? Instead of, being bombarded with notifications every morning of, oh, so-and-so left 3 words on her post. Instead, it's like you can contribute to a longer form discussion that happens over the course of maybe days or maybe weeks, right? Especially if you're discussing topics that will require much more time. Or even if you're just discussing your interest or passion or hobby, right? And I think that was a great thing about forum boards, is that forum boards would allow people to engage on various aspects of their interests, or of ongoing news and problems, over the course of quite a while before, eventually maybe a thread would get locked or would just become necroed. But, that's a whole other story. But anyways, yeah, so this is kind of what AmzroSevca looks like now. The whole idea of web wheels got turned into wheel cores, where more or less you would open up a domain, right? So if we look at the address bar up here, real quick, I'll highlight it. You'll see, you have HTTPS, right? It lets you know that the page is secured. And then you'll have www.amzro.social/p, which means page, /p, then about.html, which the HTML obviously is the web page we're looking at. Pretty much what AmzroSevca was doing is that you could go and you can make your very own domain that was associated with AmzroSevca, and then you could store your profile on it, and then you could invite others to store their profiles there too. So say, like, you want to go ahead and open a profile, hub for you and your family, or you and your close friends. You all could go and host your own contents and profiles online, on a single domain with subdomains. Of course, you'd have to pay for server costs or self-hosting costs for whatever content you put up. But assuming it's, the kind of content that you could find on most other platforms that is of, very small file size, honestly, you'd probably save quite a bit of money, and you're also in control of your, data, which you're not in control of on other platforms. And you get to decide where your profile goes, what it looks like, who gets to see it, what it does, what it features, how it, is laid out, all sorts of stuff, right? And so that was the idea of the wheel core, that you could get together with other people and you could build a web ring of profiles, pretty much. And either they could exist in various fashions. They could either be like wheel and spoke, or they could be a wheel with just kind of separate rings. But we'll get to that here in a little bit. This right here, this is in a diagram showing that, you can use AmzroSevca as a means to just basically host your own online profile, like social media profile, and then use that to link out to whatever other service. So you could use Mastodon or Mattermost or XMPP or Matrix or literally whatever. And so it's kind of sort of this process of giving people, how do I say it, their own web presence, similar really just websites back from the early 2000s, late 90s. And in a way, I guess you could kind of say that AmzroSevca was like Card. IO or whatever that website's called before Card was a thing. I can even kind of look up to show what I'm talking about. I see CARRD, and let me see here, card.co, right? And so this is where you can kind of auto-generate a static website. It's not super complex, but it serves sort of as your own social media profile off social media. And so I was thinking to myself, before Card, this was I think maybe a year or two before Card had launched. I'm trying to see here. What year did Card come out? Card.io release date. Well, Card came out in 2016 actually, so never mind. Card's been around for quite a while, but it's sort of the idea of Card. I don't know if I got the idea directly from Card, but what I was working on was similar in concept to Card, but a little bit more sophisticated. Because I believe Card is a little bit more pre-built templates like Blogger. I don't know how much you can customize your own card with HTML and CSS. And then I figured that if you could customize your card that heavily, then at that point you just build your own webpage you want to use Card. So, but anyways, But yeah, and it even lists here kind of I think how wheel cores work. So but I'm going to read this section really quick. So it says wheel cores exist as root domains or top level domains, TLDs, or their own second level domains, SLDs. So top level domain would be like azura.social, and then if I was to add a subdomain to that, which would be the www.area, it would be something like I don't know, bob.azura.social or something like that. And I'll show you that in a minute. And then profile spaces exist as subdomains and often use the web hosting of the domain registrar that the wheel core's domain is registered with. So this basically means if I go and I open up, you know, a new wheel core and I register it, say on like Hostinger or, I don't know, Namesile or something, then any subdomains that are going to be attached obviously to that domain are going to be on those registrars. And then it says, however, users are free to pick services for web hosting that are different than their wheel cores, assuming the wheel core comes with web hosting. So, like, you know, if you're going to be using, like, I don't know, Mediafire or some kind of media or VPS or something. I don't know if Mediafire has, like, individual file linking anymore. I think they do offer it with, like, a premium package, but I think it's a hassle. So, anyways, it says wheel cores can be as small as one person and as big as an infinite number of persons, depending on limitations of the chosen domain registrar and how many people a wheel core's residents are okay with having. So again, this basically comes down to like how many subdomains do you want to open on the domain and how many people are willing to, you know, contribute to the upkeep of the wheel core. You know, if you're hosting like a wheel core for like yourself and like probably 15 friends, honestly, probably one person can cover the cost of that easily. I mean, web hosting's not that expensive unless you're trying to host like several hundred gigabytes of data like every month or something crazy like that. So the really nice thing about Azure with it being decentralized is that a lot of the server costs it'd be individualized to an extent, and then people can kind of, you know, hash out with each other like, oh, you know, we'll get our own domain and then pay for like our own like content hosting or whatever for like such and such amount of dollars a month. Kind of like, you know, it's just a subscription service more or less. But it's like a subscription service that gives you access to your own stuff, you know what I mean? Or gives you the keys to being in control of your own stuff. So it's a subscription service that I think is justified and that is good, right? Because obviously storing data on the internet, it you know, it has server costs and stuff with it. People were also encouraged to run their own home servers if they could, and use their own electricity. So that was really cool. We had a couple of people attempt that. Yeah, and so then if we scroll down this diagram, I'm not gonna read the rest of this because it's pretty lengthy read. Not too lengthy, but it's like a couple paragraphs that I think it's good for people to sit down and read themselves if they really want to understand it. That's another problem I think with the modern internet is that everyone just wants someone else to, you know, figure things out for them or give them the easy rundown, the SparkNotes summary on literally everything, and it's, you know, you can't do that with everything. Sometimes you need to actually just sit down and spend time to understand a concept. Anyway, so here's like a diagram I quickly run over. Basically you'd have these wheel cores, right? And so then people would, you know, be like, well, okay, great. I have a wheel core now. I have people signed up to this wheel core now. Like, you know, how do people find us, right? So then there would be these things called a land hub, or like a landing hub where people could go and browse featured posts, profiles, community groups and stuff from these various wheel cores that would then all kind of coexist in what was called a system. And then these systems that you could run would be a part of federations. And these systems you could build yourself. Again, it's just made up of land hubs in the wheel core. So it's like you create your own wheel core that has you and a couple of your friends, and then you make a land hub, which is like your own search engine index pretty much, where you could like host, you know, various posts from across, you know, the decentralized network, or host various profiles or, you know, things like that. I'll show you that later. And then that system then could join with other systems and you can create a federation. And so there is, I believe right now, one federation in Azure, which is the one I'm a part of, the one that I run. I don't think there's any other federations. We're about to see that in a second. So you click the Join Now button. It'll take you over to the Join tab, or the content that's on the Join tab. So if we go back to About, then we click over to Join here up here. It'll take you over here, where there's like a you know, a YouTube channel you can view for Azure. I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet. I might redo it, or I might shut it down, or kind of move content elsewhere. I'm not sure what I'm doing with it yet. But you can kind of click there and get a general idea of how Azure works, and then it will walk you through how wheel cores and stuff work. And just to touch on this, I mentioned this earlier, wheel cores are very versatile in how they can be set up, right? So the different models I was mentioning earlier, like how they can interconnect. You can have a Seer wheel core where it's like no one's profiles linked to each other, right? But everyone's on the same, they're all like on a part of the same domain ecosystem or whatever, right? They're all hooked up to the same main domain and they all have their own subdomains, but none of them interconnect. Then you could have a ring, right, where like everyone links to each other, and so you can go from profile to profile to profile. Of course, people within these wheel cores would have to decide how they want to set this up. And then there's ring and spoke, where people are interconnecting to each other, and they're all attached to the central wheel core. They may have links on the profile directly to the wheel core's homepage, and I'll also explain that a little bit later. And then there's a hub and spoke model, where everyone just links straight to the wheel core's main page, but they don't interlink between each other. Of course, this could also take on multiple other configurations, where maybe some people are linked to the wheel core, others maybe aren't, and maybe some are just linked to each other's profiles, or, you know, yada yada yada. So let me show you this in action. That way I'm not just explaining a bunch of mumbo jumbo to those of you who may not be as technologically inclined or tech literate to this level. That way you guys aren't lost or looking like, what is this guy talking about? I have absolutely no idea what's going on. Here is the main page of Azure that you've seen in the other screenshots or the other iterations of it. Here's the updates blog for it. I'll run through this really quick, kind of just show you what it looks like. And yeah, so there's the updates blog, and then there's, if I can go back, can I go back? Okay, I didn't know if the button worked for a second. There's resources. This is a completely dedicated archive or library of, web development tools and components and stuff. More or less, I created like these, web development templates that people could kind of use as like Lego building blocks and freely customize. I also offer, you know, some different content management systems people get started with, and then government information. I have no clue. Oh, this is yeah, just for how the government of the network works. So it is, you would have to read through this yourself because it is a lot to digest, but Azure is a mixed democracy of sorts, and you know, the ways in which we run administrations or select administrative members, and have, you know, checks and balances in place so that Azure could always exist, even if the initial platform goes to complete garbage, or I shouldn't say the initial platform, the initial ecosystem goes to complete garbage. And then there's also themes you can download too, which I'll also, some other people have these actually loaded up on their profiles right now. Here's the featured page, which looks, it looks okay. It looks fine. I mean, it is what it is. It blends with the website much more now. And then these are LAN hubs, which we're going to touch on here in a second. And then unions, which is where federations exist. Federations and systems, actually. You don't have to necessarily have your system a part of a federation. Systems can exist independently. And then here is, this was a working widget a long time ago that would actually show the live chat from the Matrix end, or like the Matrix protocol, that can be seen with the Element client. This is just disconnected because, my fault, pretty much. I just didn't upkeep with it, and so long that I eventually just disconnected. I need to go back and fix this. But yeah, you could like see what people were saying, in Matrix, and it was like really cool. Anyways, so let's go on ahead and take a look at unions, right? And then I'm going to start showing you how the structure of Azure actually works just visually. So if you didn't really understand any of the stuff that I just said earlier, then you're going to understand it now. So you come over here to the unions index, right? And it's like here you can find a complete collection of authorized federations and systems within Azure. And it explains here, federations are a collection of systems, LAN hubs, and wheel cores, while systems are groups of LAN hubs that may or may not feature associated wheel cores. And so, of course, you can click through different letters to find, you know, these different groups and get into them. And so you don't have to. Oh, okay. Wait, hey, hold up, chat. Hang on a second. I think this was still under construction, actually. I think the federations page was still being worked on. Okay, same with Little Azure. My bad. So LA and AG are not, they do not have their own pages, dedicated pages, or sub-sites set up. Let's go to LAN hubs, because I know these absolutely work. So I think I got as far as building out LAN hubs. I think the federation was still trying to figure out how we wanted to kind of build that out, or have it on display for the web. But anyway, so these LAN hubs function as, how do I say it? I guess they're interface clones of Azure.social, right? So you come here to Azure.social, you go to the app, right? This gives you the main interface to get to everything, whether it's search engines or, you know, groups or unions, or to read the Constitution or read the featured page. I'll come back to the Constitution a little bit later. But if we go to LAN hubs, right, and you click into, say, Solar Resort, you'll pretty much get my version of Azure.social, right? You'll get my search engine. So this is more or less where other search engines are hosted. Some search engines may mirror the entirety of like Azure.social's content, so all the stuff that's featured over in Azure.social will just be shown in LAN hubs. The difference between LAN hubs and Azure.social is the categories and the content that they provide, right? So when you click into My LAN Hub, you are going to get user groups and events instead of, say, unions and LAN hubs, right? And most LAN hubs are supposed to really feature not, unions and LAN hubs within themselves, but they can. That option is totally open, but it's not really necessary, since Azure.social exists. But so for me, right, I had 2 free slots open, so I put the events and the user groups in there, retained the constitution, the feature page, updates, blog, the communities, obviously. Or wait, no, communities is something different. That replaced resources back here. So communities is also something new. This is how you find communities. So you go into a LAN hub, which is now your search engine, basically. And you can find users, and you can find content, and you can find communities. So if I go to featured, it is going to feature the same things as on the normal Azure.social, so because there was only so many posts made in this period of time, and I don't think anyone was made any new content since then. Or if they have, I haven't updated it, so that's my bad. But you can go to like communities, and you can see all these different communities here. There's only 4 open, 2 of them being for video game franchises, and the 1 being about improving the, how do I say it, the problems with our city, so to speak. So this covers things from like urban development and urban planning to covering issues of suburban sprawl and cars versus other forms of transportation, building people-friendly cities and things like that. So Transport Travels is a really cool community. And then there was Azura being the official, kind of general space that everyone could meet up in. It's kind of like the Discord town hall of Azura. And then there is Sonic the Hedgehog and Zelda. Now, the cool thing is that you click into one of these communities. You can also browse by, I think, by letter, too. Does this work? Let me see. Click S. Should give us just Sonic. There we go. Cool. Anyway, so if you click on one of these communities, it should give its own, like, community page, right? So there will be, like, each community has its own community hub. Yeah, here we go. Where you can actually see latest posts generated, or latest topics generated, within the Element or client or any other Matrix client, really, just on the Matrix protocol. So, these were just ongoing discussions. So we have, like, Sonic 2 for the Sonic CD. People ask about Sonic Generations 2. Origins of the Scam. Yeah, there were some pretty fiery opinions about Sonic Origins when it first dropped. I still feel a certain way about it. There is still a Sonic Superstars Coming Soon banner that has not been replaced. That game has now been out for about 2 years. It's going on 2 years, which is scary to think about, but, I'm not going to think too hard about that. And, so you also had a button here you could join the community directly to. This would give you a direct link into the Matrix community for the thing. So you could browse latest topics here, and then you could also click to join straight into the community. These pages were also going to be used to host news about the community, showcase events, maybe top-rated discussions or posts or whatever. And then the same thing I think followed for just about everything else. Here's the Azura community, the general forums of Azura. There's a latest topic, as you see there at the top, death of Amino documented, sort of. That was probably, I want to say it may have been generated by me, but, because I don't think anyone else who's in Azure really has ever, I don't think they ever used Amino. I think it was only me and maybe like one other person. And then other topics too, talking about other websites, or trying to, add some more inventions, and then a couple other things too. People talk about late stage web 2. Okay, what did I just go back to? Oh, it sent me back to Azura, right? Because it's a part of Azura. If we go back here, and then I go to like Legend of Zelda, you can also see a similar setup to the Sonic one. This was when Tears of the Kingdom was being shown off, and it still had not yet released. So you can tell all this stuff is quite old. Pretty outdated at this point. I desperately need to go back and update it. But anyways, so those are the community pages, and those are the communities. And then user groups, this is where I want to expand more upon how do like wheel cores work, right? So then I was like, well, I'm going to show you visually. So you come to user groups, you will find an entire index of wheel cores. You click on a wheel core, and by the way, you can either host your own wheel core in your own LAN hub, or you can, ask other LAN hubs to, index your wheel core. It's kind of like asking a search engine to, crawl your web page pretty much. So here's AsNetEvent. And so every wheel core is going to have its own main profile page, that is home to all of its users. And so you can see up here in the address bar, it has wheelcore.asnetevent.xyz. All wheelcore endings use .xyz. That's how they delineate themselves, right, or differentiate themselves from Azure.social or other things such as like LAN hubs or federations. And so you have this .xyz ending there. And then you can come onto the profile of the wheel core, where maybe like latest news of the wheel core is posted, you know, or updates concerning, you know, back end or front end stuff, whatever it is. And you come down here to a members list, or maybe events that are being hosted in it. You come down here to the members list, and you can see all the members that belong to a wheel core. So there's like 12 or 15 of us. I think, no, 12 of us. There's 12 of us. My bad. I miscounted a row. There's 12 of us who are actually currently a part of it. Granted, again, I don't know what other people have done with their wheel cores. I think some people might have pages that don't work. Right, okay, that just sends it under construction. They don't even have a page yet. Some of us definitely do. I know that one of my friends does, but I don't think they transferred it over to the new version. Do they have one? No, they don't. I think they built their new one on GeoCities, or NeoCities. My bad, not GeoCities, NeoCities, which is like the modern day version of GeoCities. I think they built their new version of it that needs to now be linked into here on NeoCities, and I don't think they ever submitted their new address for that. But if you go to like someone else, let's say, because like I think Proud Mew does not, but Sharp Access does. I just clicked on Sharp Access. So here's Sharp Access. Really cool friend of mine. They're running right now a Discord theme on their profile. So one of the really cool things about you know, Azure is, again, you get to decide how everything looks from the ground up. So if you really want to replicate, you know, that one platform that you really liked, then you're free to do so. If you want to make your profile look like Pinterest or Snapchat or Instagram, knock yourself out, buddy. No one's stopping you. You have the freedom, though, again, to also just make it look like not those things, right? Because the problem is when you use those platforms, it's like, I don't like that the developers moved this button down here. I don't like that the side panel got switched over here. I don't like that these, you know, interface updates are ruining everything. And you don't have to worry about that, Azure, because you're in control of literally everything. It is really easy to set up too. Like if I go over to Silent Unit's profile, all of these are just really basic building blocks. I know that to probably the average, you know, internet goer or someone who's not very familiar with technology, they might think like, oh my goodness, this is so complex and so hard. But if I can really break it down to you, all that you're looking at right now is literally just made up of images and text. Just stylized, of course, by CSS, but like, it's really not as complex as you might think it is. And that was my challenge for years when I was growing up. Like when I first kind of got interested in software and web development when I was younger. As a kid, I always thought that like technology was just magic, dude. I was like, there's no way I can make a web page like this. This is beyond me, until I realized like, oh, there's actually tools for making web pages. And I started messing around with them as a kid, and then, you know, I was like, oh, this is actually doable. Like, this isn't as hard as I thought it was. And so you can see they're running a Windows XP theme, which I think is dope. Shout out to Silent U. I still think this theme looks wicked. I helped them a little bit with it, but a lot of it was their idea and brainstorming and contribution. So definitely one of the most sick themes I've ever seen. I kind of helped them try to, like, you know, find the whole aesthetic of like Windows XP and like kind of pull pieces from it, and then we slowly built out various attributes for the profile. You know, give it that's little bit of like skeuomorphism throughout that you see in Windows XP. So really dope profile there. And then who else has a running profile? I don't think Exotic Stream, I don't think does. Maybe Cross Innovator. But you can also see too, this is one thing I want to talk about. So if I go to my profile really quick, right? This is my profile. Looks kind of a little all over the place right now. I don't know why this is taking so long to load. I think the internet's hitting a little bit of trouble here. I don't know if it's like something's bottlenecking. Anyways, if you look up here in the address bar, you can now see my profile that says AmzroSevca.snetevent.xyz. Thing is, if I want to leave this wheel core, I easily could. I would simply either just go get my own domain, or I just would simply switch my subdomain to a different subdomain, right? So if I want to disconnect from AsNetEvent to say, I don't know, let's say Winnie the Pooh's wheel core, right? I could easily go and just hook my site up to a different subdomain at Winnie the Pooh's wheel core. Of course, I'd have to talk to Winnie the Pooh about it if he wants me in his wheel core. But, you know, again, it's something that's very possible and something that's very easy, and I just messed up the address, so I'm going to reload it. Anyways, and so that's a really cool thing with Azure, again, is that it is very modular, it is very free, and again, you know, people always talk about with like social media platforms how it's like, well, if you don't like what's happening, use your 2 feet or vote with your wallet, and it's like, can't really do that when everything's centralized and everyone's kind of trapped on the same sinking Titanic. Whereas with Azure, it's like, if you don't like what's going on in a wheel core, if you don't like what's going on in, like, you know, a system or a federation, guess what? You can disconnect your shit and leave, you know, and that's the really convenient part about it. and that's what kind of also feeds into, the democratic principles of it as well, which I'll touch on here in a little bit, and then we'll kind of wrap it up for the evening. But yeah, so here on my profile, you can add me as a friend, which will send you then to my platform or protocol of choice, where you can add me to chat with me. So again, in this instance, it is I am using the Matrix protocol, but people could also use XMPP or maybe other like Delta Chat or something. I mean, there's a bazillion chat platforms out there that do different things and run on different protocols. So that's that there. More or less, I would say most people are probably going to have their profiles linked to Matrix, because Matrix is seen as kind of being like the primary protocol that, like, it's kind of like the shared protocol amongst like all users, but you can also opt for secondary protocols too if you want to spend your time more elsewhere, or maybe like the add from button instead prioritizes going to like Snapchat or something. I don't know, people are free to do whatever they want, and of course for those watching who are like, oh, it links back to something centralized, like, isn't that bad? And it's like, yeah, I mean, it is theoretically, I guess, and if you have the perspectives that I do, that centralized platforms are a nightmare, then yeah, it's not ideal, but the whole point of Azure is that people are supposed to, is to give people freedom for how they want to host themselves on the internet, if that makes sense. And so if people want to link back to centralized platforms, that's their business, but at least they have the freedom of hosting their content off of those platforms elsewhere, right? And so if they lose their Snapchat or the Instagram account, guess what? They still have their Azure account, or their own Azure profile, I should say. It's not really an account. And they saw their Azure presence. So, yes, you could link it to Facebook. Would I recommend it? No, absolutely not. But it is something that you can do and that you have the freedom to do. And of course, you have to discuss that between wheel cores, because certain wheel cores have their own rules about what, sites they want to have people linking to and stuff. And that comes with its own delegation, democracy, and governance and all that stuff. Anyways, if we go down here a little bit, so you have the send chat button in the right here, actually, on the profile. You might be like, what are all of these numbers? This is a unique identifier string that every single profile has. It is long, but that's because this is not really, it's not something that you would add people by, right? If you look at Discord, or if you look at Twitter or Instagram, a lot of those platforms have Pomelo usernames, or handles for people to add each other by. If you want to add someone in Azure, you do not use this. You instead just use their address. You just would say, hey, I am Bob, or Bob at like bob.sunrise.xyz, right? And then they would go on ahead and they would find your profile, scroll down and click the add friend button. So that's very much human language. This ID string is not human language. It's not very human friendly, or human language friendly. And it's not meant to be. You would never use this to add someone or to locate them. This is solely here used as an identifier for security reasons, right? So if there is an imposter running about, there is going to be a certain string of letters and numbers that are your unique identifier that also connect to your profile in the form of an avatar. So these rings that you see in these avatars, you might have noticed this by now, there are these colored rings on profiles that have specific color values that then correlate with a part of the ID on a person's profile as one of these strings in here. I'm not going to name exactly which, but you can kind of figure it out if you're familiar with color codes or hex codes and RGB and HSL, right? So, but yeah, if you look at that long enough, you'll figure it out. I don't want to say it too explicitly because obviously it's a security feature. It's kind of there for a reason, and it's documented a little bit more in Azure itself once you kind of get past the initial security phrases or phases. Here is a button that doesn't work. I think this is a makeshift one. This is just Donkey Kong Country 3 music. It's me showing off that you can put music on your profile page, kind of like, again, MySpace or something. Or, like those old websites before Chrome made it impossible for music to autoplay because people kept putting stupid shit in their web pages. But here is a description of me, right? So you can read my biography, where I talk a little bit about, I don't know, what did I write here? I created Azure in an effort to finally break free from the bleak prison that is the modern internet, encourage others to return to the origins of Web 2.0, think of Greenster. Yeah, pretty much, that was the whole inspiration. So there it is from the horse's mouth. And I am also the horse who's giving this presentation. And then here we have Museum and Spaces. The museum is, I think, just where you can find all your old blog posts, So you can find them in a whole list, and then obviously you can feature your latest blog posts here by how many ever slots that you want. I have 2 on my page, so people can see the latest 2 posts, and they want to see anything older, they would go here. If we go back to the profile, and then there's also spaces. So this right here, I'm just featuring the Azure official space on my profile. I didn't open up a space of my own. So, because I don't think As an Event had a public space, I think it's just a private community one on Matrix's server side. Or not server side, but like on the Matrix protocol, which you have to access with the client. Then there's a view past blog buttons that takes you back to the museum, and then you can also link like other stuff on your profile, right? You want to personalize a little bit, so I linked to like Scribble.io, which I think is a fun web game, and then also my Trackmania Exchange profile, because I do play a lot of Trackmania, and as many of you know, I'm a big Trackmania player and fan, and have been for a long time. And then the Join Azure button, I think, just takes you all the way back over to Azure, and so that's kind of where you can have people either link to the Wheelcore's main page, right? So if I wanted to put a link to say wheelcore.asnetevent, I could put a button there that does that, or I could link to someone else's profile in the Wheelcore. And that's kind of how you can start building web rings or, hub and spoke models and all sorts of crazy stuff. But yeah, I mean, that's really it. That's the entirety of, Azure and how it works. Obviously, I have my own landing hub, which is more or less, it's like a on-profile version of a land hub. So this is like is where I can feature direct links to various things. So I think all this links out to just Solar Resort. But I can have my own personalized land hub on my own profile page because, I'm just that cool. But if you go back to Azure, the last thing I want to talk about, actually, before I go all the way back, I do also want to say with customization, every single component seen in Azure can be customized, because again, this is just, it's web development, more or less at the end of the day. It's just simplified web development. So if you look at the Azure logo, it changes per Wheelcore. People can set their own, their own emblems and icons. So if I go back actually to, let's see, let me just go back to wheelcore.asnetevent and go to someone else's profile who has a more customized, let's see here. I know one person does, and I want to say I think it's a person, yeah, I think it's Cross, what's his name? Cross Innovator. Yeah, he has a Marvel Comics icon, which looks so dope. I don't know why his title banner looks like a cleaning supply logo, but yeah. Anyways, I mean, this is his profile, so I shouldn't bash on his style. I think he has a pretty cool background back there. I'm not even sure what it's supposed to be. It's like a tornado or something. But yeah. Anyways, I want to just quickly show that because yeah, it's every single part of Azure is customizable, and that's what's so fun and cool about it. And you just get lost building just crazy stuff. A lot of things that I'm going to talk about before we all head out, or at least before I head off to bed. I don't know what the rest of y'all are doing with your nights, but is a constitution of Azure. So this was more or less the foundational document for why the network, or the digital network engine was built, and the network itself, the digital network itself, and what it was striving to fix. What blunders it wanted to avoid, and what form of governance that it wanted to adopt and to nurture. And I mentioned previously that Azure is it's a democratic community of sorts. The way that that I laid it out here in the Constitution is that it's a decentralized democratic constitutional republic. So you have people who have the autonomy to open up basically their own property on the internet, and then they can come together and join these various spaces and communities in an interchangeable modular way. And those people, of course, can then vote for representatives in administrative positions in various federations and stuff, who will then help guide the direction of Azure. So the platform is very much beholden to its users, rather than the users being kind of they don't have a say in the platform. They're beholden to the platform, I guess. That kind of makes sense, So it's the platform beholden to the users instead of the users beholden to the platform. Or better put, it is the administration beholden to the users instead of the users beholden to the administration, which has been a very big problem and plenty of platforms, whether we're talking about Reddit or old forum communities, or Twitter or Instagram or Snapchat or Pinterest. I mean, you just go down the list, really, of platforms. And so that was one big thing that really needed to change, was the platform or the product or whatever it is should be for the customer or should be for the user first. It should not be for the ones in power first at all, right? And I think that has been probably one of the biggest side of frustrations with the internet over the years is bad moderators and bad administrators and bad administrative figures. And that's because the internet very much functions in a sort of like a feudalist form of governance, right? Where it's like, I am the king of this land, and you peasants will listen to whatever I say, and if I don't like you, I will, kick you out or have you executed or whatever else, And so, with a more democratic approach, as an administrator, you are seen and treated as a public servant, right? Your role is to serve the community first. It is not to antagonize. It is not to lord power over other people. It is to create a safe and healthy and welcoming space for everyone, and to resolve disputes and to help people grow as individuals, to help them grow as humans, instead of just seeing them as another faceless individual on the internet, which I think is honestly led to the increasing of bad behavior on the internet and trolling as time has gone along, especially with the combination of the rise of social media in its current form. And so, this entire Constitution of Azura is a document similar to the Constitution, obviously, of real countries, that states what rights they are granted, what is expected of them, what the values that we want to look to uphold and keep across the network, even though, again, we are decentralized, but, some common shared values that we look to uphold and prioritize, and of course, again, to value those values. And so it works, again, sort of like a federation of states. If one, how do I put it, if a wheel core or a land hub or something started acting, it's gone rogue, there are, mechanisms to address that. But we still want to give people enough freedom within their bounds of freedom. That kind of makes sense, right? Freedom doesn't mean freedom from consequences. It just gives you that breathing room to, act out your autonomy in a way that, at least as long as it's not harming other people or causing further harm to society. So again, if you're using Azura to spread I don't know, some crazy hate campaign, or I don't know, to tell people to go drink Clorox or something insane, obviously then you're probably going to get blacklisted from the rest of the network, and things will happen. But hopefully that would never have to happen, because really the whole point of Azure is to bring people together and to establish healthy relationships and connections across different backgrounds and culture and things like that. So anyways, that's all that there was to show here. And hopefully you guys found this little tour fascinating. And this is pretty much how Azura has been built up today for over the past, I'm going to say, about 9 years. It's been a work in progress, Obviously, Azura didn't start official development until a couple years ago, but it has been a continual, gradual process, and now this is currently where it's at. Everything you're seeing right here, though, is probably not going to look like this for much longer, because I am thinking of revamping the platform, and brainstorming with those who are already in it, and finding a way to make it more approachable, a little bit more modern, and to achieve its goals a little bit better. And the other really cool thing that I want to mention before I go, is as Azura evolves, which it most certainly will, it might evolve in ways that maybe some people don't like, and so the whole idea of Azura is that it can be a phoenix of its own kind, right? That it can kind of split off and branch and replicate itself as many times over as necessary, and if people liked a certain version of Azura, and maybe Azura just goes down a certain path that, maybe the voting majority wanted to change in a way, and then, the other half's I don't really like this, well, they have many avenues to replicate what's currently available to them. Either they can, mirror it in their own land hubs, their own federations, or open up their own clone, so anyways, so hopefully that was insightful and explained what I had been doing in terms of web development and networking projects. And I'll go on ahead and catch up with you guys in another video or another project. So thanks everyone for joining tonight. I had quite a number of viewers here, just kind of popping in and learning a little bit. So hopefully you guys got some good information out of this. Sorry I didn't really interact too much with chat. This was more so of just giving a presentation and kind of just getting people familiar with the idea and with the work, and everything that I've been striving towards. If anyone out there does find Azure as a concept be interesting, and you're interested in, developing like something out like this down the road, I will always be looking for, other people to brainstorm with and to really resolve the current ills of the internet with. So, yeah, that's gonna be all for tonight, and hope you all have a good one and enjoy the rest of your night. And I'm gonna go on ahead and call it a wrap on this end. So, thanks for stopping in. I'll see you guys next time.